Hey, thank you for joining me today for our weekly devotional. We try to do these weekly devotionals each week so that you can understand some of the ways of how to read and apply different sections of Scripture. Today, we're looking at an Old Testament narrative, and when we look at these, it's with the goal of applying it to something in our life. So it's in other words, reading this and trying to understand some principles in the case of narratives that we can transfer into our own life. And so my name is Justin Allison. I'm a discipleship pastor here at Greenwood. And so we're going to be looking at Esther chapter 6 today. We're going to be looking at the story of how Haman and Mordecai's roles are reversed, or their fortunes are reversed here, and things do not end up the way that Haman thought they would. So let's look at the text now. So Esther chapter 6 says, "That night the king had trouble sleeping, so he ordered an attendant to bring the book of the history of his reign, so that it could be read to him. In those records he discovered an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the eunuchs who guarded the door to the king's private quarters. They had plotted to assassinate Xerxes." You'll remember that from earlier on in this book. So verse 3 says, "What reward or recognition do we ever give to Mordecai for this?" His attendants replied, "Nothing has been done for him. Nothing has been done for him." And then verse 4 goes on to say, the king speaking, "Who is that in the outer court?" the king inquired. And as it happened, Haman had just arrived in the outer court of the palace to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole he had prepared. He's trying to get his revenge on Mordecai. So the attendants replied to the king. They didn't know all of that information. They reply, "Haman is out in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. So Haman came in, and the king said, "What shall I do to honor a man who truly pleases me?" And it's at this point in the story that Haman thinks his wildest dreams are coming true. He walked in, was invited into the presence of the king. The king's asking how to honor someone who truly pleases him. And he's thinking, that's got to be me. I guess that's one thing we can start to learn from. There's an example not to follow there. Don't be so arrogant that we always think all the good things are about us. I'd be lying if I said I'd never done that, because I certainly have thought that, I was special at some point when I shouldn't. And maybe you have too. And so that's one thing, that's an example we can not follow in this story. So let's go on and see what it says, the rest of verse 6. Haman thought to himself, "Whom would the king wish to honor more than me?" So he replied, "If the king wishes to honor someone, he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with a royal emblem on its head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let him see that the man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robes and led through the city square on the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go, 'This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor.'" "Excellent," the king said to Haman. "Quick, take the robes and my horse and do just as you have said for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the gate of the palace. Leave out nothing you have suggested." So you can see the irony here. That's one of the things I love about Old Testament narratives, is often they're loaded with irony. In the last chapter, Haman really thought something great was going to happen to him, and that he was going to get his revenge by putting Mordecai to death. And that's not what happens here. God has been at work while Haman slept, while Esther slept, and while the king was trying to sleep. And so God was working in the circumstances to bring about good for his people. And so just like Haman had suggested, he takes the robes, he puts them on Mordecai, and he parades him around, yelling out, "This is how the king treats someone he wishes to honor." And then he goes home, dejected and humiliated. He tells his wife and his friends about it. His friends end up saying in verse 13, "Since Mordecai, this man who has humiliated you, is of Jewish birth, you will never succeed in your plans against him. It will be fatal to continue opposing him." While they were still talking, the king's eunuchs arrived and quickly took Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. And so here, even in the way that the plot works out in the story, as soon as that pronouncement is made that Mordecai is a Jewish person, he's got Yahweh God on his side. You're not going to be successful against him. And at that very moment, they escort him off to the banquet he had been so hopeful about just the day before. It's a little foreshadowing of what's to come in the life of Haman. So now we're at a moment where God has ironically reversed Haman and Mordecai's roles, and something else is left. It's almost like a cliffhanger for the next week's episode to happen to Haman. We know something's about to happen, but we're not quite sure what. We know he has this great, grand, tall death device set up in his home, but we don't know what's going to happen with that. And so we're kind of left wondering with that tension right now. But in this story, we can see that God is at work on behalf of his people, that God will take care of his faithful servants as he did Mordecai. And so we can follow that same example of Mordecai throughout this story and a little bit in this particular chapter of trusting God to come through when we need him. You and I can do that in the way that we live our lives day in and day out. We trust God with our finances. We trust God when we drive down the road. I trust God when I let my teenager drive somewhere to meet a group of friends and then come home again. There's a lot of trust that we have in this God of the universe who is actually the one in control of our lives and actually not us. And so we can do well when we act like Mordecai, when we put our trust in God alone. And so it kind of goes against the practical advice of, don't put all your eggs in one basket, or, even the investment advice of you should be diversified in your expectations and all that kind of stuff. Well, no, as a believer, that's not what we do. What we do is we put our entire trust, everything that we have, into that basket that is God's, and we let God take care of the results. And when we do that, we're told that we will never be disappointed. Now, let me caveat that by saying, it really says he will not be the one who does that will not be put to shame. And that's different than saying that we will always get our way, because we won't always get our way. It's different than saying that things will always be easy, because I can tell you, I'm middle-aged now, things are not always easy. But God is always good. And we will never, those of us who follow him will never be put to shame. God will protect us and hold us in his hand. And part of that promise gets to happen here on earth in the life that we get to experience and live, this adventure that he has for us when we truly follow him in obedience. But then also, you got to remember, a lot of that is in the promise of heaven, that even if these things had not happened in Mordecai's life, and if things had gone horribly bad according to our viewpoint, Mordecai, as a person who believes in God, and that faith making him righteous, would inherit that life that Jesus talks about in the New Testament. And that life is enough. Anything else we get in this particular life is just bonus. And so it's really helpful if we can remember that in the days and weeks moving forward. So I hope that that's been helpful to you. I hope that you'll remember not to follow the example of Haman and arrogantly think all the good things apply to us. And I hope that you'll be able to do that this week. I'd love to talk to you more, whether it's by email. You can email me, jallison@greenwoodbc.com, or you can come find me on a Sunday over at the information desk, and I'd love to talk to you then. Y'all have a wonderful week.